Not too long ago, black and white photography was the default. Everything was in black and white. From newspapers and books to TV. All of this was due to the limitations of color. Today, with digital photography, color has become the default, and black and white is more a choice, a creative choice. It is my choice for my photography work, and in this video I'm going to talk about the why, when, and how to do black and white with digital photography. Why? Why black and white? I get asked this question quite a lot. And my answer is always the same. Black and white allows me to be more creative, allows me to create images that I wouldn't be able to create with color. You see, color photography is more about being faithful to the original scene, while black and white makes us free to interpret that scene the way we want. And in my humble opinion, that makes black and white photography a little bit more artistic than color photography, because art is a lot of things, but it's never about reproducing reality as perfectly as possible. It's more about the interpretation of the artist, the photographer in this case. There is always some kind of interpretation and some kind of translation when we take a scene and we try to make a photograph, when we try to make an image of that scene, even when we shoot color. But black and white gives you more flexibility when it comes to make it your own. And that's because we can manipulate those black and white images in post much farther than we can do with a color image. With color, we can only go so far before the image starts to look fake. Black and white is much more flexible in this sense. When? Well, I do it all the time. I only shoot in black and white. I know that many photographers shoot only in color, and when they run into an image that doesn't really work in color, they try the black and white version just in case it works. And that's totally fine, but in my opinion, that is not the best way to create good black and white images. Black and white photography requires a lot of commitment, requires the photographer to take it seriously. It takes years to train your eye to see in black and white. And good thing we have all the technology that can help us today with this mirrorless camera, so we can preview our image in black and white directly in the viewfinder. Film photographers had to use viewing filters to preview what a scene would look like in black and white. And it is really important to have an idea of what the image is going to look like, because without the color, we might be making the wrong assumptions. The good thing is that the more we do it, the better we get. How? This might sound obvious to some people, but many photographers don't even consider that shooting black and white with their digital cameras is an option. The truth is that digital sensors are all monochrome. They can only record the intensity of light. A lot of light, very little light. In order to get the color information from the scene, we need to install a filter in front of the sensor. I think it's called a Bayer array. That filters red, green, and blue light, so the sensor can record the intensity of each color independently. But if you don't install that filter, you get a monochrome camera, like the Leica QM, I believe that's the name of the model. In theory, not having that filter there will give you more resolution and more contrast. But there are two reasons why I would never consider that camera, even though I'm a black and white photographer. The first one is the price. I could never afford a Leica, and the second one is because I want that color information in my raw files. We can play with each color independently, and that gives us a lot of power. The possibilities are almost endless. I'm gonna show you the settings that I use in my Sony cameras to shoot black and white, to see the preview in the viewfinder, and I still get that raw file with all the information. I'm not really sure how other cameras work, but I'm pretty sure that nowadays every camera will let you do what I do. Well, as I said, I shoot raw because that gives me as much control as possible when it comes to editing, to manipulating the image in post. Then, as I said, in my Sony camera, there is an option called Creative Style. I have it set to black and white. That creative style only affects JPEG, but since we are shooting RAW, the RAW file is intact. But the advantage is that we can see the preview both on the screen and in the viewfinder in real time in black and white. And this is amazing. It makes black and white photography so much easier, and you learn much more, you learn faster because you have instant feedback. You are looking at the scene with all the greens, the reds, the blues, and then you look through the viewfinder and you see how that gets converted to black and white. I customized this creative style a little bit. I increased the contrast to +3, so it's as close as possible to the final image that I'm gonna be creating afterwards. I just wish this was a little bit more customizable. I would love to load my Lightroom presets in my camera. I usually shoot underexposed, just by a little bit, a third of a stop or half a stop. With digital cameras, you have to be really careful with the highlights. This is the opposite of film. It's very hard to retrieve details from the shadows when you shoot film, but it's very hard. The opposite is true with digital. It's very hard to retrieve details from the highlights if you clip them. Even though I gotta say that I'm not really afraid of clipping neither the shadows nor the highlights, because that's something I'm gonna do myself in post. You see, I like to compress the tonal range of the image. There is no pure blacks on my images. There is no pure whites on my images. And this is what I was talking about earlier. This is something that would never work in color because the images would look pretty bad and pretty fake. But in my opinion, it works beautifully in black and white. I can't believe I forgot about this, but when I compress that tonal range, that might create blobs of very dark areas or very bright areas without much texture or detail to them. I use grain to add texture to those areas, and I think that the result works pretty well. Another things I usually adjust in post is the brightness or the exposure. I have to raise it a little bit because I was shooting underexposed. Depending on the scene, I increase the contrast, I increase the clarity. If I'm going with a low-key image, I take that black slider all the way down. If I'm going with a high-key image, I turn those whites all the way up. And then again, depending on the image, I might play with the colors independently. Usually with the blues, I might darken the sky, just taking the blue slider down. Or I might want to create some haze, just taking those blues all the way up, so I create a high key image that way too. The last thing I wanted to talk about black and white photography with digital cameras is infrared. I just got my RX100 Mark V back. I converted this camera to be an infrared only camera. I'm having a lot of fun. I'm gonna be making a video just about this in the future, but I'm still learning, so it might take a little bit. I had shot infrared film before, but the experience was a little bit disappointing because if black and white, just regular black and white, is already sometimes hard to visualize, infrared is even harder. So I was kind of blindly shooting scenes that I didn't know what they would look like afterwards. But now with this camera, I can see the preview in real time, so I can be more intentional about what I'm doing. I can also shoot handheld, which is great. In any case, as I said, something to talk about in the future. And that's all for this video. I hope it was useful, and I hope that it encourages you to try some black and white with your digital camera, because it's a ton of fun and you can see the world with through different glasses, and it's a different way to see the things that we are used to see every day. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one.